Hello guys, and welcome to my new channel, The Feather of Ma'at. This channel is going to be one part political, one part social, and one part whatever the fuck I want. So let's get right into this first video. I guess I'll explain more about my channel in another video. This first video is a response to a lecture by Dinesh D'Souza called How Do I Know God Exists? He's a bit of a slow talker, and I cut out a lot of what he says because he says some things I agree with. But aside from that, let's get into the parts I don't agree with, shall we?
And these new atheists have a very different agenda than the atheists of the past. In the past, what the atheists wanted to do is police the boundaries of church and state. So let's take down the 10 Commandments from the Texas state capitol. That was their agenda. If you want to practice your faith at home or in private, that was okay. But the new atheists are very different. They want to attack Christianity in the private sphere also. They really want to make every Christian feel like a total idiot.
So what's wrong with that, Dinesh? Do you think that there's some reason we should not actively oppose the idea of religion? I mean, we're not banning religion. We're not beating religious people. We've done nothing immoral. So when you sit here and say old atheists were fine because they just cared about separation of church and state, but new atheists suck because they want to go out and actively oppose us, consider how actively religion has opposed atheism. Don't just consider that. Consider how most religions fundamentally tell atheists that they're immoral.
The point I want to make is that at that young age, I felt didn't have the tools to defend my beliefs. I found myself backing off, pulling away from Christianity, not because I didn't want to believe, but you could say my mind was getting in the way. And this is the strategy of the new atheists, to drive a wedge between the mind on the one side and, you may say, the heart on the other.
So your point is, Dinesh, when looking for absolute truth, not just scientific truth, not just the truth regarding our universe or direct tangible things, but absolute truth, don't use your mind, use your heart, use feelings, use faith. One thing that will always remain true, especially to me, is that emotions cloud judgment. If you feel a certain way, a way that may or may not be true, if you have an emotional attachment to an idea, then when a new idea comes up, you will not be so willing to consider it. This, Dinesh, is literally how authoritarian regimes form.
Now, the new atheists are particularly targeting young people. Their point is, okay, we are going to let the Christian parents breed them, but at some point, these parents are going to have to send their kids into the world. That's when we'll get them. Why? Because we, the atheists, are influentially ensconced in the media, in the universities, in education. So we're going to use the tools of skepticism and inquiry to challenge these young Christians and, you might say, torpedo their beliefs.
This isn't even a point, at least not from what I can tell. Is your point, Dinesh, that it's wrong to target young people because they're impressionable or something? That is really interesting of you to say, because in order to think that this is a logical point, you would either have to not be aware of or be ignoring the amount of indoctrination that religion relies on to spread. If parents did not indoctrinate their children into religion, we would see a lot less religious people, and that's obvious. And this indoctrination is also why religions tend to have a geographical location where they're most common.
Partly because I think that the new atheism today marches behind the banner of science. The new atheists essentially say, look, science is a better way of knowing than Christianity. Why? Because science is based on reason. Christianity is based on faith. And as the atheists describe it, science is advancing and religion is retreating.
Why do you say this as though objectivity is not more important than religion or faith or subjectivity or feelings or whatever you want to call it? When you talk about this, you sound as though you think these atheists are stupid because they claim science is what's important, but we just know better. I mean, I can't even take this seriously because It's obvious to hold this belief that just your religion is so much better than science. You have to be so pretentious and ignorant.
Several hundred years ago, somebody posed a question to the church father Augustine. This is Augustine who wrote Augustine's Confessions. And the question goes sort of like this. If you think about time, time goes back. But really, no matter how far back you go, you can always go further back, can't you? If somebody says, 2,000 years ago, well, before that, 2001 years ago. 1 million years ago, well, before that was 1,000,001 years ago. And so the question that was posed to Augustine was, when did God make the universe? Did God actually create the universe? And if he did, what was he doing before that? Now, Augustine gave a reply that is actually one of the most astounding replies ever given in the history of thought. He said, based on a meditation on the book of Genesis, he said, God created time along with the universe. But, interestingly, today, if you send your son or daughter right down the road to a Physics 101 course at UC Irvine or UC Berkeley, they will find out in the first 3 months that as a direct consequence of the so-called Big Bang, not only did the universe have a beginning, which is to say, not only did all matter have a beginning, but very interestingly, space and time also had a beginning. In other words, space and time are properties of our universe.
So your point is that because Augustine correctly stated that there was no time before the universe, that means that science supports his claim and that God made the universe. Look at it this way, and this I will bring it back to this again in a minute because he just keeps up with this logic. Whether there was time before the universe is binary. It's a binary. There either was time before the universe or there wasn't. That means right off of the bat, you have a 50% chance of correctly predicting it, assuming no bias. However, we also have to realize that Augustine just says what religious people always say when their argument makes no sense. Anything to convince people that it does make sense. And I've seen you do this when you've talked about all the science that disproves God in your debates with Hitchens, Dinesh. Oh, Augustine, you must be wrong because if God created the universe, what did he do before that? Simple. There was no time before the universe. And another one, all of this science disproves religion because it negates what the Bible says. Simple. God created science. It's just this mental gymnastics that religion has always used.
The ancient Hebrews said that there was nothing, and then there was a universe. Now, by the way, this is very different than what any other religion says. In many other religions, you have God or gods that, in a sense, fashion the universe, but they don't make it out of nothing. They take some other pre-existing stuff, and they basically sculpt the universe. But the ancient Hebrews said, no, there was nothing, and then we got a universe. And by the way, the ancient Hebrews, as far as I know, conducted no experiments. How did they find out? They basically said, God told us. And 2,000 years later, what I'm saying is that their description of what happened is pretty much right on.
Again, like you said, every other religion was wrong on this, Dinesh, so it's not really a good case for religion since almost all of them were wrong. All the Hebrews had to do, though, was take the binary being there either was or was nothing before the universe, and flip it the other way to be different. What? All these religions are saying God created the universe out of pre-existing matter. Well, God told me they're wrong. You see, back when religions were always changing, it was always a contest for religions to seem to appear the most revolutionary. It's cool that the Hebrews were right, I guess, but it doesn't support the existence of a God in any way.
Some leading scientists have looked at our universe, and they've noticed that it has a whole bunch of numerical values. I mean, think about it. If I were to take this bottle of water and drop it, it will accelerate to the ground at a known rate. Gravity. So in our universe, there are all these constants and forces. The electromagnetic force. That happens to be also the speed of light. There's the strong nuclear force. There's something called the electroweak force. So there are all these numbers. One physicist named Lee Smolin, he says it's sort of like God is sitting at a big desk. And on the desk he has 100 different dials. Every dial is calibrated to a very specific number. And here's the question that the scientists are asking. What if we sneak into the room, and when God isn't looking, we fool with the dials? We just change them around a little bit. What would happen? And the scientists who look at this question say that what would happen is if you touch one of the dials and you move it, not 10%, not 1%, but 1 part in 100,000 millionth million, you would have no universe, you would have no life. This, by the way, is a topic that is described by the physicist Stephen Hawking in his book, A Brief History of Time. If you look in there, you'll find the example I just gave. The whole idea is that the entire universe appears to be a kind of gigantic plot to make possible, well, us.
No, Dinesh, there would not be no universe, as you say. If you change the way gravity works, or even if you did something as huge as removing the nuclear force, there wouldn't be no universe. The universe would be vastly different, and you're right, the universe would certainly not contain any life. Though it is technically possible that if you change it a little bit, it could maybe contain life. Now, of course, Dinesh, I've already heard your argument 3 minutes later into this video talking about the multiverse, but I'm going to retroactively bring it up now, and then when you complain about how there's no evidence afterwards, I can tackle that then. So the idea of the multiverse claims that there are infinite universes housed outside of the realm we know as our physical universe. Assuming you believe this, which I will get into why you should in a minute, or not necessarily believe, but support, an infinite amount of universes also means an infinite amount of universes with life. Now, of course, you don't believe that there's a multiverse, so let's get into that right now.
I was in a debate some months ago against a physicist, and he was clearly very shaken by this idea of the fine-tuned universe, but he said, I think I can account for it. And I said, how? He goes, well, maybe there are multiple universes. I said, really? How many? He goes, frankly, I don't know, but he goes, I think there probably are an infinity of universes out there. And if there are an infinity of universes, it's not that surprising that one of them, unlikely though it may seem, happens to be suited for life. That just happens to be the one we're in. And I said to him, this is really a far-out, fantastic, and kind of a thrilling idea that you've got all these universes. I said, what is the scientific or empirical evidence for it? He goes, well, there is none. And I said, well, that's okay, but you're at the frontiers of scientific research. Do you expect that evidence will be coming in the next 20 or 50 or maybe 100 years to give some empirical support for this really exciting theory? He goes, oh, no, not only is there no evidence, there never will be. And at this time, genuinely curious, I said, well, why not? And he said, well, because if there are other universes, they would operate according to other laws. In other words, they would be permanently cut off from our universe. We could never find out about them. And I said to him, look, wow. I would like to believe that, but I just don't think I have that much faith.
This is very naive. This is very hypocritical. This is all kinds of stupid that, quite frankly, I don't understand. First of all, why wouldn't you have the faith to believe in the multiverse, but you have the faith to believe in God? This goes to prove the indoctrination point I brought up earlier. Obviously, you believe in God and not the multiverse because you were told to believe in God when you were young. If there's no evidence for this multiverse, as you say, do you truly believe there is any more evidence for God? Now, there's no evidence for the multiverse, of course, but let me bring up a small point that explains why I support the theory of a multiverse rather than the theory of a quote-unquote almighty being. There's a philosophical principle called Occam's razor that basically states whichever theory takes less assumptions to believe is the one you should believe. Dinesh, scientists don't take a hardline stance on the multiverse. We understand there is and never will be any evidence for any of it. However, the multiverse theory makes sense because it can be assumed with just a few basic ideas. It's not much of a logical jump to say if a universe can be created from nothing, then more than one universe can be created. That's not a huge jump to make, right? That's not even trying to explain what created our universe, simply the state of existence our universe is in. You, however, Dinesh, claim to know exactly what supernatural being created the universe. You claim to know exactly why he did it, and you claim to know everything this being believes. Let me ask you, Dinesh, which idea takes less assumptions? Now, after this, Dinesh goes on to talk about how just because Christians have done a lot of bad things in history doesn't mean they did it because of Christianity, which I don't necessarily disagree with, so I won't include that in here, but you will see him very, very quickly backtrack this philosophy with this hypocritical double standard.
But here's the point I want to make. While the atheists are crying major, inconsolable crocodile tears over the crimes of Christianity, crimes often committed 200 or 500, or in the case of the Crusades, 1,000 years ago, they are often ignoring and downplaying the much greater crimes of atheism, which are not ancient, but have occurred recently, in our lifetime, in the last century, and are still going on today. And people say, well, Dinesh, are you talking about like Stalin in Russia, or Mao in China, or the Nazi regime? And I say, well, yeah, but only in part. That's only the tip of the iceberg. It's true that those regimes alone, those three, in the space of about 7 decades, managed to kill close to 100 million people. That's true. But that doesn't even count a procession of dictators beginning with Lenin and continuing through Brezhnev and Andropov and Chernenko. It doesn't count Enver Hoxha, Kim Jong-il, Fidel Castro, Ceausescu, Pol Pot.
Like I said, this is a very hypocritical point. It's also a very stupid point because none of these regimes killed in the name of atheism. But you can't say anything about Hitler in terms of religion. I mean, the guy grew up Christian, though he never outwardly said he was Christian during his time ruling Germany. However, he never claimed to be an atheist, and he praised Islam for lining up with Germany's beliefs. And as Hitchens has told you many times previously, Dinesh, German soldiers literally wore belt buckles that said Gott mit uns, which translates to God with us. So while it's very hard to pin down Hitler's religious beliefs, there's no logical reason to believe he even was an atheist. Agnostic, maybe, but to say he was an atheist is just an outright stupid claim. On top of that, you can't really kill in the name of atheism. You can't slaughter millions of people because God didn't tell you to. You can't bomb a marathon in the name of the multiverse. The only type of atheist terrorism or genocide would be to kill religious people on the basis of difference of faith. And Dinesh, atheists aren't doing that. I'm sure it's happened before, but can you actually name an instance? When churches get terrorized, it's because of other religious people, not atheists. No one kills people because they don't believe in a God.
I mean, all you have to do is, you don't have to be a historian, you just have to crack open the collected works of Karl Marx. And you'll find out that the atheism is not accidental. It's absolutely central to the whole communist scheme. Marx says that religion is the opium, the opiate of the people, a kind of drug, that blinds you to social injustice, and you need to get rid of it before you can create the new man and the new utopia, freed from the shackles of God and religion. So my conclusion is that it is atheism and not religion that is responsible for the mass murders of history.
Now, I don't agree with all or even most of Marx's philosophy, and Dinesh, I'm sure you and me, neither of us like Marxism or communism, but I don't necessarily even disagree with Marx in this specific instance. Religion does, in lots of cases, blind people from facts. However, let's assume Marx is wrong in his belief that religion blinds people from social injustice, okay? His atheism still wasn't what was pushing his beliefs. The social injustices that he saw in the world were what was pushing his beliefs. He just believed religion could cause people to overlook these injustices. which he, in some cases, isn't incorrect. In fact, I would say in a lot of cases, religion fundamentally caused and still causes some of these injustices, especially if you look at the Middle East.
See, normally if you don't believe in something, because there's no proof of it, what do? You ignore it. You go about your everyday life as if the something you don't believe in, for which you have no evidence, does not exist. Case in point, I don't believe in unicorns. But you'll notice I have not written any books. The Unicorn Delusion. The End of Unicorns. Unicorns are not great. You won't see me debating the issue of unicorns. I just kind of go about life as if there aren't any unicorns.
Dinesh, you know there's a damn good reason no one actively opposes unicorns. Let me put this in a hypothetical for you, Dinesh. We know unicorns aren't real, correct? Yet there is a cult of unicorn followers following something that does not exist. They write a book claiming this book is the holy word of the unicorns, and because of the words in this book, they do things like bomb innocent followers of the holy leprechaun. They drive trucks into crowds of people. They stone women who have been raped. They cut the throats of anyone who does not follow the words of the unicorns. They mutilate babies. They oppose gay marriage, all in the name of these unicorns who don't even exist. Then, Dinesh, will you debate those unicorns? Or will you sit there and say, well, I believe in unicorns, but I don't believe in all of the words of the unicorns, only the ones that I think are true?
And what I want to suggest to you is that today's atheists have found a beautiful solution to this problem. How do you get out from the shadow of moral judgment? It's really simple. Abolish the judge. If you can get rid of God, the commandments, the edicts, the laws, the rules become optional. And so what I'm trying to suggest is that the new atheism of today is not just marching behind the banner of reason, it is also promising young people, you might say, moral liberation. Liberation from those strict rules of Christianity.
This shows how Dinesh really feels about us atheists. Oh, atheists don't do what they do because they think it's right. They do it because they're immoral people who don't want to follow the rules of Christianity. Have you even read the Bible, Dinesh? I don't think even you want to follow all those pesky rules of the Bible. How about the one that says gay people are deserving of death, basically? And that's the New Testament. So much for hate the sin, love the sinner, am I right? Another thing is that atheism does not have any fundamental morals. So you might be able to make the claim that we are liberated from your morals, Dinesh, but you can't say we fundamentally believe bad things. In fact, I would think most atheists believe more strongly in the idea of loving thy neighbor than most Christians would.
You want me to be a physicist and a biologist and a historian and a philosopher all at the same time? And I say, well, no, I'm not asking you to do that. In fact, the new atheists don't do that. What do? Well, basically, they put on a nice big holster with a couple of massive 6 guns. They've got some magic bullets in there, and they walk out, hey, Christian, Christianity is responsible for most of the violence and suffering in the world. Bam. Or, how do you know your religion is true and everybody else's is false? Bam. And often as Christians, we're a little taken aback, we're unprepared. So I think, at the very least, we need a bit of a bulletproof vest. True, some of you are going to say to me, well, I don't want a 6-gun, I don't want a holster. Okay, but maybe you'll be open to a few arrows for your quiver. Or perhaps a few pellets for your blowpipe. So when the atheist comes into the arena and says, hello, Christian, I got something for you, bam, you can reply, miss me. And I got something for you, bing.
Since this is basically what Dinesh leaves us with, I will leave you with this. Dinesh, you can pretend like we come to debates with just a few factoids that can easily be deflected if you know what you're talking about. The bottom line is you can deflect all of our bullets, and you'll never have a metaphorical blowpipe to shoot back with. You will never have any proof of your religion, because unless God happened to show up and prove how holy and divine he is and say the Bible's right, there will never be any proof for your religion. In fact, the fact that your religion has changed and switched ideas so many times, the fact that you have an Old and a New Testament, is only proof that your religion is false. It's man-made. If your holy book was truly the Word of God, why'd you have to rewrite it? Did God change his mind? Or is it because you can't control a population if you're not appealing enough to the population to listen to you? Ponder that for a while, and I'll see you next time.